Abiy Ahmed has coined a prosperity party, right? Which embraces each and every nation in a country, each and every region of the country in a political spectrum of the country, right? In the case of TPLF, it was a coalition of four major nations: the South, the Amhara, the Oromia, and that of Tigray itself, right? But this rebel group criticized that as if Abiy's administration is going to set a unitary government. This is another paradox again. Can you elaborate it?
It's not paradox, but it's an apparent backpedaling and also disingenuous labeling. Why? Because I've been in the center of the party. I know there had been a number of calls to unify the party, to let affiliated parties of the 5 regions to join EPRDF and then have a broader party. Even that call was actually being made by the senior leadership from the TPLF. I remember in one of our Congress, it was me who used to lead the EPRDF office. So it was me who organized that Congress. So Yum himself went out and then criticized us because we are dragging our feet not to let this party come together. And before that, I know in a number of congresses, we used to decide that the council and the office or the executive committee has to undergo study and to come up with a resolution as to how we can come together in letting affiliated parties to join EPRDF. So it was a clarion call, and then it was long overdue. And then it was not actually being pushed by the affiliated parties like the Somali, the Afar, Benshangul, Gambela, and Harari, but also within the TPLF, but also within the ANDM, senior leadership was pushing, look, we have to change our program, to adjust our program a little bit. Because when affiliated parties would come and join us, the revolutionary democracy strictly would not be followed. So we had to adjust somehow to the current reality. Because EPRDF itself had been adjusting itself from the strict communism to a little bit of mixed one. And then after the factional splintered out, and then with the new democratic developmental state paradigm towards capitalism. So it is pragmatic to read your current reality and try to embrace it, and then for that to adjust your program and manifesto and bylaws and your policies based on that program. So it's just being practical and pragmatic. It was not just moving toward this unitary government. In Ethiopia, unitarism will never work, ever. That Ethiopia is gone. So particularly them, they cannot accuse anybody of that. So they know it. So in Ethiopia, what is the plausible, the feasible, and the probable way is to embrace diversity, okay, as we are diverse. So to deny that diversity wouldn't hold Ethiopia together.
Yes, they are arguing that this new prosperity party is going to, have or set old Ethiopia, which has a single order, with a single entity, with the same sentiment of a single Ethiopia. And the ethnic federalism has to be there. They are arguing that, right? How do you put your insight?
Look, there is a balance that we Ethiopians must wish to strike. One, we are a diverse country. If we try to neglect that diversity, then it's moving back to the old Ethiopia and moving back to the old struggle and moving back to the old chaos. The other aspect, if you just simply immerse it in your differences, like you are Oromo, and if you want to fence Oromo against others, just because you have Oromifa language and culture. Now I'm Silte, and if I take my Silte culture and then enclave it and then fence it against others, then I'm immersed, we'll be immersed in our differences. But again, in the name of a unified Ethiopia, if you deny that you are Oromo, or if you are asked to denounce your being Oromo to become good Ethiopian, then it's a crime. If I'm asked to denounce my being Silde, to forget my language and culture, okay, to be seen as a good Ethiopian, then there is no such a thing as Ethiopian. So we have to respect our differences. We have to embrace our differences. But again, our differences, we should not be drenched in our differences. Okay? That could be the basis, the foundation. Because we must be who we are. I don't have to be somebody else to be good Ethiopian. But again, there are a lot of things, a lot of fabrics which can hold us together. And then we have to work on that togetherness. All right? Me as being myself, you as being yourself. So we can create we, you and me, and others. That would create Ethiopia. So the future of Ethiopia should only be strengthened when we embrace this pluralism, and again we work together for the commonness. So this is obvious. There cannot be unitary Ethiopia, but again there shouldn't again be in Ethiopia which is immersed in its differences and then forgot its unified fabrics. So there has to be that balance.
Okay, we can genuinely say that Prosperity Party is not going to, amalgamate nation and nationality in a single entity and going to launch the old Ethiopia, which has a single order, single pleasant. You see, what do you say about it?
No one with his right mind would go for that aspiration if it really meant to govern Ethiopia. Because the current Ethiopia and the future Ethiopia could not be governed in a way that it used to be before the last 40 years. Now the current Ethiopia could only be governed, one, by rekindling hope to each and every individual, by respecting individual right. Like for instance, we have regions, we have administrations, we have areas which could be administered by a certain entity of a certain language and culture. But what we missed in the EPRDF time was to encourage individuals, so it is written there, in practice, those individuals who may not wish or who may not be able to allege to a certain particular language group, who would think like, for instance, they have a multiple identity. Like you are born with one tribe and then your mother from the other, your grandmother from the other, then you end up being a mosaic. An individual we end up with a mosaic, with your parents and your parents' parents. So for those individuals, there seems to be a difficulty of finding a place for them to play. Usually that kind of problem was manifested in urban areas. In rural areas, okay, it's just unified people, then you can manage it. So individual rights somehow was being suffocated by collective rights. Maybe now Prosperity would aspire and do something to also embrace those kind of individuals, because as we go along, urbanization would come, middle class would come, and the upper class would come. Then this metropolitan culture, when it matures, then you may not that much would try to cling into your linguistic family, because you can mingle with a national society, a global society. And then though you cannot denounce it, though you cannot prohibit it, more and more people would wish to be a national figure or a world figure rather than a certain language family in a certain village or a certain region. So that has to be let come. But you cannot impose now on a certain tribe or a certain language family. So you have to let it come gradually. But you can also aspire for that. I think Prosperity aspires for that. That doesn't mean it makes it a unitarist government, because that's a reality which would come. 20 years, 30 years, 50 years down the line, Ethiopia would not remain as agrarian as it is now. It became an urban society. It became a middle class society. It became a higher class society. So it becomes more individualistic.
Okay, they are still yelling, even in amidst the war. They have been saying that this unitary government, the fascist, which is going to erode and erase the ethnic federalism through the map of Ethiopia and going to coin a new unitary government. Our people, I need to quote it, Tigray is going to be in an old school political status quo of Ethiopia. No more federalism, now onward. As they sure.
It simply doesn't hold a truth of water. They just say it to confuse people. Otherwise, as I said, no political party with a sane mind would go for unitary government.
Thank you. Okay, some media, including international media, used to report that the war between, actually it's not a war, the law enforcement measure operation between the federal government and that of the TPLF clique is a kind of civil war. They have been saying that. Reuters, Al Jazeera, and some other international media were favoring the rebel group. What do you say about it?
2 to 3 points may be mentioned with this regard. One, they may exaggerate the capacities, the potential of TPLF, because they said it's been at the center of the government, it's been the leader of guerrilla fighting, it's been the one who by and large hosted the military government, then it has well experienced soldiers and generals and the like. So they thought it is the most powerful, so the government of Ethiopia cannot stand against TPLF. That's why they assume then they can smash the government and then it will result in civil war. So it's exaggeration of the limits of TPLF. The other aspect, they used to connect some of them, some so-called analysts. You can mention Erman Cohen, you can mention Martin Plaut, you can mention the guy who used to fly to Mekelle University. So all
William David.
So William Evan is a little bit trying to rationalize sometimes. There are others who seem to be very much to know about Ethiopia and then the power dynamics, because they used to tell to the world that now the dynamics is changed, but they don't want to admit, because if they admit, their script would be obsolete. So for them to remain relevant to the international community, they have to keep on to their old script. They have to keep on telling to the world that the belief is stronger, and then it can run over the government, and then Ethiopia could descend into civil war. That's why they stick to their old statement. Otherwise, the reality doesn't call for that.
Great. Imprisonment warrant has been disclosed by the federal government and Attorney General of Ethiopia, right? Some of them are, overseas. They live abroad, you see, and most of them are coroners, generals of TPLF, and the rest media guys and other academicians who based in US, Australia, Canada, so forth. How the Ethiopian government planned to bring those people to justice, because they live abroad?
There are two scenarios. One, if the government, the Attorney General collects adequate evidence to present to the court of law, then they could be convicted in absentia. That's one aspect. The other aspect is to talk to each and every country whereby these people against whom the arrest warrant is issued, and to convince those countries which they live in. For this, again, there are two scenarios. With certain countries, with some countries, we have extradition agreement, treaty. So if we have the extradition treaty, then because of our treaty, we can ask for those countries to hand over the suspects for us. In some aspects, we may not have extradition treaty, but we may have to pursue diplomatic means. Because if those countries would seriously take the partnerships that Ethiopia has, they shouldn't allow anybody who destabilizes Ethiopia in their country. So we have to negotiate to convince those countries. It will not be as easy as with those with which we have extradition treaty, but we have to try our level best to convince our partners.
Great. Abiy Ahmed has briefed House of People representatives before 2 days, right? But we haven't seen that TPLF labeled as a terrorist group. And majority of a citizen of Ethiopia have been awaiting that.
I mean, labeling a certain institution, you can do it anytime. But given chance, still, because what we believe is, I also personally believe is, many of the rank and file of TPLF do not have much of a say. There are only few big wigs and the stronger ones, the influential ones, who would collude and decide on the fate of others. Now, if like this operation is over, now it is successful, when people are given chances, we may have thousands of TPLF members who have never been suspected as criminals. They may come out and maybe tell stories. They may distance themselves. They may decide to join the government and the people. They may decide to pursue a peaceful life and then try to constructively engage in Ethiopia, because TPLF members are in their thousands, so hundreds of thousands. By designating TPLF, you put all this out of the game, and then it's a loss. So it's only very few who've been calling the shots, who've been deciding everything. Others were just simple cadres, like our friends, our comrades elsewhere in the region. So by collectively designating as a terrorist, and then it's just a loss. So giving opportunity, giving chance for many of them to distance themselves and to come to the open and to decide to engage in constructive engagement, then it is a plus for prosperity. It's a plus for Tigrayan people. So
TPLF, Tigray People's Liberation Front is not over?
Yeah, until it is decided. Now, with regards to power, yes, it is concluded. It's no more the ruling party in Tigray. But if you look at the interim administration of Tigray, its decision is, because you cannot chase out everybody from Kabale to region, because you may not have anybody who is experienced enough. Now, if you embrace the Kabale administrators, if you embrace the Warada administrators, if you chase out the regional ones, the regional council and administrators, then the grassroots are very innocent people. So they should not be penalized by the crimes which are made by the very few at the top. So if you let them chance, they can denounce this criminal act, and then they can engage positively. If they do that, it's a plus. So it is easier to designate the party as a terrorist one, or like if you count, it's about 200, both the generals and civil officials. And then if you extend it, could be 300. The rest are just listeners. They were just decision executioners. They were no decision makers. So if you just cut out those, and then if you invite the others, if you denounce the part, they can rebrand themselves. Maybe they can repent and try to make up for the lost opportunities in building Tigray and also Ethiopia. So it could be decided anytime if the parliament wishes to decide it. But it is also always good to give for more people chance to repent for the past misdeeds and then to engage in constructive engagement. So it is good, but it always be there on the table if the parliament wishes to decide on it.
Okay. Currently, Tigray is being led by the interim government, which is led by Dr. Mulu as a provisional government of the region, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have they started operation? Have they started practical work out there? And how is the reaction of the people?
They are in Tigray. I think you might have also seen via media in Dansha and Humara area. They've already established administration. I think they were in Shire yesterday, in Shire area. So people were very jubilant, very positive. Now, as we go along, then they will address all the towns and cities, and also zones and waradas, and they also now increasing their numbers so that they can address as many towns and cities as possible. So with the ones which are now accomplished, people are happier. And then as we go along, we may be surprised to listen to stories which never been surfaced.
Okay.
So people may be happier. So as they see that they are free to speak, free to do whatever they wish with the current administration, they may be jubilant, they may be happier to move forward. Then I think the beginning is good, promising one.
Okay, the sixth national election is going to be ushered after some 6 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tigray is still in kind of turmoil due to TPLF clique, right? Would you think the sixth national election is going to be conducted in Tigray as well with this very few period of months?
We still with few months to go. The coming 1 month and the coming 2 months would decide as to how it could be handled. But otherwise, there are also options. If things would not be settled as fast as the government wished them to be, then as we used to do it in other times, then you can, for instance, leave Tigray alone until things would settle and then move on with others. Or things would settle quickly because now they are promising. So if they keep on fast, as they are proven to be promising, like if we conclude in the next month, establishing the whole administration, because there are already political parties, if people are happier with the current interim administration, then they may go and elect for the permanent administration with the parties that they are given and running in Tigray. So it depends what we are going to do in the coming months or 2 period of time.
Another question, sorry, Ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
Former Deputy Speaker of Kenyan Parliament, I don't really know whether you know him or not,
Mm-hmm.
has said TPLF, especially the godfather of TPLF, Meles Zenawi, and Geta Joseph and another so-called, with its nickname, Quarter,
Mm-hmm.
has been destabilizing the Horn African nation. And Meles Zenawi has carried out a genocide in the Horn region, destabilized and balkanized Somalia into small entities, and South Sudan case again. And he has also mentioned the Sudan case, the Ethiopian case. All these were carried out with conspiracies of Meles Zenawi. You see? Do you believe that? Why these people obsessed with divide and rule? You see, they always, coin a kind of casualties between people. It can be between nation, between countries. You see, how do you put that? Was that, sound?
No, it depends on. It's good if you look at a case-by-case basis, because some of the things, if you just assert, may also go against our national interest. So just because you hate somebody, then you cannot put every blame on that person. I don't know what's the standpoint of that person, the Kenyan one. Is it a genuine one, or is it profound assessment, or is it an allegation, or is it with its own hidden agenda? So we have to assess it, because crude judgment, whether to praise or to denounce, would not be reasonable. And then if I fall for that, then it would be unbecoming for me.
Okay. Some of giant TPLF's companies account, have been frozen out, right? Was that a correct measure, or some are saying it's too late?
Too late is something, but being late is better than not to try it at all. So
it is better than never.
Better than never. So now at least it's tried. So the government has an intelligence information. Evidences may come based on the performances of these institutions. So if the evidence outweighs the claims, and then being accountable would come in. If we still have scant evidence, then the government may keep on digging for more information and evidences. But taking the action, I think, is a proper one. Once you suspect, because people have that suspicion, that wider understanding. But for the government to act, you cannot just follow your intuition. You need to have evidence. Now I think the government has adequate evidence, and that's why it stepped in to take action.
Okay, Ambassador Redwan Husen, I really appreciate for your precious time. I know that you are really tight with tasks because you are a spokesperson of this state of emergency task force. I mean, different international media give you a call for information because they need to hear from the horse's mouth. I really appreciate you. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. The pleasure was mine, and happy to serve.